Just so you know, you are part of an ongoing conversation we're having throughout the Southern California region. Harbor College is one of our proudest partners in this 7-college regional collaboration that is trying to promote career pathways into global trade, supply chain, logistics, and e-commerce. So that's why we are excited to give you an opportunity to hear from somebody who's living it and hopefully is going to share with you some great insights, and rumor has it, he has access to companies that are looking for interns and potentially even workers someday, right? So please make sure you find Jay on your favorite social media because he could quickly become your friend. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and give you a real quick encapsulation. Unfortunately, Jay's bio was so large that I was printing it, and I ran out of ink, so I stopped printing it. So Jay Tsao is our proud, and we're very privileged to have him here at Harbor College. Jay wears many hats. He is an entrepreneur, he is an investor, he is an advisor, but most of all today, he is going to be talking about the importance of the digital-based economy. So let's give Jay a round of applause and welcome him. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So as you can see, we're going to make this as much of an informal conversation as we possibly can. We want this to be a highly interactive session. I know your time is short because you want to get back to classes. But if we keep you from classes, you'll have a good excuse to tell your professor because you can say, I heard from an amazing speaker. Right?
No one wants to go back to classes.
Exactly. So please don't follow our examples. My mantra was don't let classes get in the way of your education. Please, professors in the room, avert your ears on that one. So Jay, before we get started in the lively debate discussion, I think a lot of our students are probably going, how did you begin your journey and get to this place in your life, being able to do all the cool things that I talked about? So if you can, just maybe give us a real quick acceleration of your life and journey and career experiences.
Sure. So how many students in here? Okay, and the others are administrative or faculty. So I've always been an equal opportunity entrepreneur. Started my first business when I was 15, and started various businesses, offline and online, through the course of my career. And I don't mean to brag or boast, but all that means is I failed a lot. So there's a mantra in entrepreneurism, and that is fail early, fail fast. Because you learn more from your failures and your successes. And I've, throughout my path, I've dabbled in private equity and finance, but I've always had a passion for technology. And I've always had a passion for international trade. So my background, family's background, were all in Asia. So they did a lot of manufacturing and contract manufacturing of various type of products. And I've always been fascinated by consumer products. So I'm a big products guy. I love to look at, hunt for trends and look at voids in the marketplace and figure out a way to fill that void. So an opportunistic play in terms of meeting consumer demand, and have always been interested in understanding the flow of goods through a supply chain, through the movement of goods domestically within a country and also globally in the context of international trade. So I've advised startups, I've invested in startups, I've built ventures and companies, whether it's in fintech or whether it's in healthcare-related entities. But my passion has always been in global trade tech, and focusing on utilizing technology to create efficiencies in the way that people purchase and have goods delivered and fulfilled to them. So I'm a big products person, and in today's environment, if you love products, you have to naturally love e-commerce. We live in the digital age, and purchases and transactions are moving away from brick and mortar, from offline, into more the context of e-commerce and mobile commerce, which is kind of a big craze, not only here in the United States, but internationally, right? So I have offices in Korea, in China, and we're setting one up in Brazil and Chile, and then we're looking to expand our footprint in the EU and Europe. And what we aspire to do is help emerging brands create entry into new markets efficiently and quickly. And so, we've been working with various different types of products, from apparel to personal goods to homeware to kitchenware to health and beauty to food and beverage, which we focus a lot on the last few years. And we help brands, we represent brands, big brands like Nestle and Hershey, but also emerging brands like the Barbara's Cookies, the Sensible Foods. Those type of brands reach a global audience because everyone wants to sell to new consumer base. And the struggles that we've seen with small and medium-sized and emerging brands are distribution. So the holy grail back in the day was, I make a product, I make a widget, or I make a, clothing line or something, and the goal is to try to get into Walmart or Costco's of the world. Because if you got into Walmart, you were successful, right? It's a very difficult path in terms of working with all the buyers and doing all the vetting and paying all the slotting fees and all of these type of things to get into a Walmart. If you're in, they have a tremendous footprint, distribution, and your business will do quite well. However, the difficulties in getting into mass retail have really put a lot of small business out of business on an everyday basis. So we work with the large distributors and large mass retailers, from the Targets, from the Costco's, from the London Drugs and Zellers in Canada to Toys R Us in our child and infant care lines. And we've realized that a lot of the small and emerging brands are trying to get to this holy grail of going to mass retail, but they really don't have what it takes to work with the Walmarts of the world or the Walgreens or the CVS's, because there's tremendous amount of inventory requirements, capital requirements, and they nickel and dime you in terms of all these allowances when it comes to margin. And it's hard for a small business to survive. So naturally, a lot of these companies will sell to omni-channels online, like the Amazons, the Etsy's, or the eBays. But eventually sales will plateau as well. So they're looking for ways to grow. And the really only growth mechanism is global, right? Because 95% of the world's consumers live outside of the United States. So it doesn't make sense for product brands in the United States to just compete in bloody waters over 5% of the consumer base, right? Doesn't make sense. So really the ability to scale your business, you have to transcend the domestic boundaries and go international. But the problem is a lot of companies, the small and medium companies, didn't know how to do it. They don't have the right connections. They don't have the right relationships. And so what we've done over the past few years is help these brands reach new markets quickly and try to solve their problems.
Jay, terrific stuff. And once again, folks, this is really your session. So I hope that all the things that Jay is sharing, if you have a question or a comment, that you will be motivated to ask that. So we'll get to you in a second. Jay, you said a lot of great things, and I think it's always important for our audiences here to understand and appreciate. The world is a very big place. Mm-hmm. So let's try to see if we can kind of micro-target a little bit here in Southern California. What would you suggest to students to be able to start pinpointing an area of the world or a region or a culture that helps them say, okay, I'm going to really immerse myself. I'm going to understand the language, the customs, the traditions, and the business practices. 20% of the world's population is in China, but is it a place that's also very crowded? Are there other places that people here in Southern California should be paying close attention to?
Great question. So I think Asia is naturally, because we're here in the Pacific, because a port, we're close to a port that is the busiest in the United States and drives tremendous amount of traffic from the Asia Pacific, that people naturally focus on Asia. I think if you come from a certain ethnic background, you have some low-hanging fruit to go after, right? So if you're, of Hispanic descent, Middle Eastern descent, whatever it is, I think looking within your markets, you have some, family or friends or network that naturally that you can target and go after. I think, going to school in a pretty diverse environment and institution like Harbor, gives you an ability to reach out to other student body that are diverse to be able to kind of understand which are good markets. So we sell to all the major continents except Antarctica. And
you're telling me the penguins are not a big market for you? So.
And we on certain types of products, there are certain consumer bases and geographic areas that tend to gravitate. But all in all, I think we're pretty agnostic in terms of the geographic footprint. I think markets in and of itself all around the world are pretty, I'm not going to say pretty, I'm not going to say mature, but they're all emerging and they all have tremendous amount of value that they can bring to someone who's looking to get into supply chain or an entrepreneur trying to create a product that they want to sell. Because we're in this digital economy and this digital age, it's easy to reach consumers, and consumers are becoming more aware of trends of certain type of products and lifestyle type of products that they want to gravitate to because of the mobile phone, because of initiatives that the Facebooks and the Googles of the world are trying to shorten this digital divide to be able to allow people in sub-Saharan Africa having access to Wi-Fi and smartphones and having access to the internet. And so everyone's going to be online. And so therefore, I think, to your question, going after the kind of cultures that are closely related to you, I think are naturally kind of the best pathways to take.
That's really terrific. So Jay, let's get a little bit deeper in some of the the wonderful array of brands that you talked about that you interact with. Talk to us a little bit. You mentioned some of the emerging spaces and financial technology, fintech, and the like. What are some things? Obviously we all understand something that we touch, smell, taste, and feel, right? But what are some of those other kind of invisible economy type of companies that maybe people in the room can also be paying closer attention to as well?
I would say there's a lot of buzz around technology. There's a lot of kind of buzz around students right now kind of gravitating traditionally before it was the finance field. People gravitating towards healthcare. I think two really emerging sectors are global trade, in terms of global trade supply and logistics, which is traditionally not a really sexy field. And Brandon and I talk about that all the time in terms of moving goods, UPS, warehouse workers, et cetera. But those are that's part of the operations. But there's going to be some revolutions in terms of how supply chain is done. And supply chain is also is basically meaning how do value chain partners within the chain of delivering goods from manufacturer or producer of a product to the end user, the customer, how does that work? How do you shorten these value chains in order to make it efficient for goods to move? And then number two, I think an area that's really not talked about, you're going to see the next 20, 30 years is going to be really emerging is agriculture. So agriculture, I think, is a really great category that, again, over the last 30, 40, 50 years has been non-sexy. No one wants to study agriculture, unless you go to UC Davis or something. No one wants to study agriculture and learn about farming and all this type of stuff. However, subsistence farming, producing organic products, health-based, type of living products, all come from that. And so people are, you go to restaurants now, they're buying beef that's locally grown, vegetables that are from farm to table, those type of things. So I think agriculture is going to be a really emerging market that more and more people are going to gravitate to, and you're going to see some of the the top universities who traditionally, have students that matriculate into finance. I went to, Cornell in the East Coast, and a lot of East Coast schools, kids just graduate and they don't know what the heck to do with themselves, and they just go to Wall Street. They just matriculate just down to the finance industry. But I think more and more people are going to start moving into these non-traditional careers, and there's going to be a tremendous amount of opportunity when it comes to both technology, manufacturing, and data science. So data science is obviously this big buzz, but a lot of these industries are using data to really make really efficient decisions on how to kind of disrupt existing producers, existing brands, existing processes and methodologies.
Absolutely. Almond growers in California should feel good about that. So, with that said, of course, here in the epicenter, one of our previous speakers talked about how LA County is the epicenter of the global trade economy. We can't forget our entertainment and our fashion friends. Are you seeing that that's continuing to widening the market? I mean, yesterday, as we had an opportunity to hear from one of the big, entertainment brands, Disney, that values that. But our independent filmmaking is and new designer boutique apparel industry folks, are they finding global markets, or is that part still very old and antiquated?
I think it's absolutely going global. So if you look at one of the burgeoning markets in China, for example, they're talking about export of media or import of media. What are they talking about? They're talking about the entertainment industry in an emerging market like China growing vastly, right? So we were at World Trade Week and Disney was talking about it, but the phenomenon is really huge in terms of the entertainment and the music industry within China. They're doing so many things in terms of creating movies and expanding entertainment talent and artists and whatnot. And so they're importing a lot of technology, they're importing a lot of know-how from Hollywood, from all over, in terms of getting access to intellectual property, copyright material, and figuring out how to really grow their internal market, because traditionally we think of China as kind of like this country of piracy, right? They take U.S. films and DVDs and then they sell it on the streets. But right now they're really trying to grow and they're investing a lot of money. So Alibaba, you guys all know Alibaba, they're traditionally in trade and whatnot. They just set up an office in Pasadena, right? Yeah. And that Pasadena office is focused on what? They're focused on media. So Jack Ma's looking to invest in growing connections with media. So when we talk about global trade, we're not just talking about products that UPS moves or FedEx moves or Staples or Office Depot. We're talking about intellectual property. We're talking about services. We're talking about know-how. And that's really where this idea of global growth in terms of trade is really affecting many industries.
So it sounds like, from what you're saying, there's a lot of direct and indirect jobs, from marketing to finance to operations to management, that our students can really be thinking about. Political science, history, geography. Sure. All of a sudden, things that we didn't pay attention to in high school become very, very quickly relevant, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think focusing on global, and global is this kind of buzzword that's been talked about, and glocalizing, which is taking kind of things in a global context and try to localize it for the local market. I think it's overused. However, there are so many opportunities because the world is getting smaller with technology, with the internet, and with supply chains that we're experimenting with, but a lot of other big companies like Google and Amazon are experimenting with. Things called 3D supply chains and what we call the physical internet. So the internet traditionally, I don't want to get too techie, but TCP/IP is the protocol that transfers data, right, from place to place, through Wi-Fi, through Ethernet ports, whatever. And it takes you take a piece of data, you split it up, and it has headers and all these type of things, and it looks at how to move this data the most efficient route. And then at the end, it comes together, and then it delivers this media. So that's how the internet works. That's how the phone traditionally worked. So the idea of the physical internet is, how do we do that with physical goods or physical services, in which we break up things in a way and then deliver the product utilizing a 3D supply chain the most efficient way. And so there's a lot of opportunities, and I think, whether you want to go into marketing, whether you want to go into healthcare, whether you want to go into the services industry, the field of global is I think creating a lot more opportunities than we've seen over the years. We're seeing some sort of matured state. 20, 30, 40 years ago even, everyone wants to go global. Big companies were going global because they had the capital and the resources to do so. But small and medium-sized companies never were really able to take advantage of that. So it was just kind of a term that people threw around to look like they knew what they were talking about. But no one really, a lot of companies didn't go global because they didn't know how. And there weren't the resources and the systems in place for countries in order to kind of facilitate, allowing multiple players to really go global. But now there are. Now there's a lot of things in place and infrastructure in place. And you're starting to see countries formulating, free trade agreements, and the whole TPP, right, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and there's other partnerships and alliances that are being forged that basically say, hey, we need to come together and allow the free flowing of goods and services, IP, know-how to each other so we can share and help each other's constituents, which are business owners, access new markets and kind of grow business so that we can help prop up the global economy. So we see more of these things kind of being facilitated by the government. There's definitely more and more opportunity.
That's terrific. So Jay, in a minute we're going to open up the floor and ask questions. And before we do that, I think that one question that might be on a lot of people's minds is, as you are creating and advising these companies, what are the type of skill sets and the mindsets of the people that are coming and working in these environments, and even perhaps someday being able to incubate their own business enterprise? What are you finding?
Great question. So I think skill sets going to college, this may or may not, be kind of in line with what Harbor's, their kind of mantra is, but the way I view college is you're coming out with some skill sets in critical thinking, in problem solving, in communications, in working with others, team building, those type of things. Some people will call those soft skills. However, I think those are the most important things that come out of at least your undergraduate education. You're definitely getting a good knowledge base and well-rounded, body of knowledge. However, you don't tend to come out of college specifically with a really trade-based skill set, right? Unless you go to trade school or stuff like that, or you're really kind of, maybe you go to school for accounting. There's certain, exceptions to that rule. So really, I think that's really important when we look at hiring, when we look at interns, is really their ability to self-learn. I think that's really important. So in today's environment, millennials, they say they're going to have 6, 7, 8 careers in their kind of lifespan, right?
And that's just while driving Uber, right?
Yeah, right. So they're going to experiment with the digital, the on-demand economy. There's all kinds of things. How are they getting these skill sets to be able to hop from career to career after 2 or 3 years? Well, I think the willingness to be disciplined and learn various things on your own is really important. So self-learning, I think, is really important. So there's, the digital platforms we talk about all the time, like, the Coursera's of the world, or EdTech, the MOOCs, the lynda.coms, the Udemy's. They're democratizing education in a way that's, that we've never seen, right? So I can learn how to do financial modeling and reading a P&L statement and doing a M&A financial model without ever being a finance major, because I can go on Udemy and take a training course that lasts 10 weeks, do it completely online, and that's what kids graduating Goldman Sachs are taking, right? And it's $50, right? So accessing that information and knowing and having the drive to be able to create your skill sets and learn on the fly, I think that's a tremendous skill set in today's economy that I think a lot of employers will look at. On the technology side, we hire developers and computer science majors, and they definitely embody this what I'm talking about, because they're learning a certain type of language or whatnot, and maybe we're developing on a platform that they're not used to the language, they're not used to the coding structure, the database, but they learn on the fly, right? We call it OJT. So the OJT element, on the job training, is really important for them to be able to find resources and learn on their own and be able to solve problems in a way that aren't being directed. You should do X, Y, and Z to solve the problem. They figure out, I'm going to do A, B, and C. And so those type of skill sets, I think, are really important in terms of for young people coming out of school.
That's terrific, Jay. Super. So now we're going to direct our attention to all of the experts in the room, which are you, right? We're going to be learning from all of these fine folks, Jay. So we'd like to open the floor. So if you have a specific question or even a comment that Jay would be able to field, we'd love to hear from you. Please, and if you could stand up, just tell us your name and if you have a major or perfect. Welcome.
And I was wondering what you're talking about the $50 program at Goldman Sachs.
Oh, so you can go on like Udemy or Udacity. Have you heard of those platforms? Yeah, you can go on there, and there's, I know one for example. It's called like Training Bridge, and it's a company that they do a lot of corporate training, and they have all of these assets in terms of video content, and they said, you know what, we're just going to throw all of this on Udemy. Right. So that anyone can access it, right? So going to some of those online portals, the elite colleges are offering free education, right? Yale, you can go to Yale's, open up platform. You can take their, Econ 101 class that the Yale undergrads take for free, right? You can go like all the massively open online classes, the MOOCs. So, MIT, the Harvard of the world, Stanford of the world, edX, right? Khan Academy. All of them are offering things, Wharton, UPenn, one of the, the nation's, one of the traditionally top business schools in the world. They're offering the first year MBA course, from corporate finance to leadership to HR management to managing and leading global organizations. All of their first year curriculum is 100% free online. So you're taking courses that an undergrad that got into UPenn is paying, $150,000 for. Yep. Their first year of education is complete. Now you don't get the degree that they get. However, you take the same exact courses with the same exact instructor, taking the same exact classes for absolutely free. And if you want a certificate, you pay Coursera $20 or something, right? So all of this is open. Yes.
So let's say you finish that course. Would you still consider a person without that, diploma over? Would you consider them at the same?
So that's a good question. That's a hotly debated topic amongst companies these days. Like how do you put the value on someone having that education versus someone belonging to the alumni network and actually having that piece of paper? And a lot of students were up in arms when these things started opening up because they were saying, okay, well, this is going to dilute my education and it's going to dilute my degree. But these courses, so I think it's a work in progress. Employers still value, unfortunately, that piece of paper because they know that, number one, you've gone through and you were held accountable in terms of, kind of finishing. And number two, you belong to a network. So a lot of corporations like they hire kids from these schools for their talent, yes, but also they know that these kids have access to a network that could potentially help their business in terms of bringing customers, bringing BD, business development opportunities, partnerships, whatever it is, right? So there's still a value there that someone taking these courses online don't provide. But I will say that in 20 to 30 years, I do feel that corporations will start valuing these type of education a lot more because for the main reason of cost. A lot of these kids going to business school, half the kids in my business school class were sponsored by their employer, meaning the employer said, okay, you're middle management and you're a rising superstar. I'm going to pay for your education. I'll pay $150,000 and have you take 2 years off. Extend out your employment contract, so you're going to stick around more, but I will fork the bill for your education. A lot of more employers are going to realize the value of these courses and say, well, okay, I can not have to pay $150,000. I can take the same courses. I can just pay maybe a few $1,000s and still retain these employees. Now, so from a cost standpoint, I think it could be, it will be extremely valuable for companies, moving forward.
And not to mention, there's a lot of entrepreneurs in the room that may or may not necessarily. It's about skills-based competency, so they want to gain the skill.
It's not about the paper.
Yeah, it's not about that degree or diploma. So.
Yes, ma'am.
What he was asking. So with that first year being free, same identical classes as if you were paying for those classes. Are they still transferable like any other class?
No.
Can you then roll over into that second year of the program and pay for the second year? Like,
No, unfortunately not. They're just courses that are offered in which they have a camera that videotapes the course. You have access to instructors in terms of deliverables and you know, whatever it is, but you're not formally accepted into the program. It's just a third-party platform that allows you to take these courses to really do some, you know, it enriches your education.
and they won't consider the students that did well in those.
No, unfortunately not, because the students didn't formally go through the application process, right? To get into Wharton, it's like their acceptance rate is quite low, so they take the cream of the crop. So they're saying we're going to open this to anyone who can take the course. However, those who are actually considered students in an alumni base and actually has a net ID and whatever, they're an accepted student.
So they would have to take, if you have a student like that actually took the courses for free the first year, and let's say just by fluke they got into the program, they would have to retake those courses all over again anyway.
Most
with the
likely, yeah.
program.
Most likely, yeah.
Where to go to?
Yeah, this is, again, this is just so you can have a knowledge base. It's not that you can take these courses, have credit, transfer the credits, and then say that, hey, you know what, I kind of partially graduated from Wharton. It's just, you know, being inaccessible.
And Jay is actually making mention of a broader conversation we're having at this college and other colleges is how do we do skills assessment, especially from private companies, right, who are going to eventually employ you, is what you are learning in the classroom, what is going to be applicable in the workroom, right? So that's something we're also
So I think
working
Brandon brings up a good point in terms of the value of this education. So traditionally, you know, students look at the value of education as, you know, the end point, right? It's a means to end. I'm getting a degree, and that degree is going to help me in some way or another. I think that's going to be a shift. And people who are taking these courses are not looking at the degree per se, but they're looking at skills. Skills are more important than the degree. I mean, we've looked at people with great degrees that don't have good skill sets.
Yep.
That's worthless, right? Or people without degrees but have really good skill sets. So this is a way to kind of transcend that, that type of, the way people perceive traditional education. So a lot of entrepreneurs take these classes because they're not down the traditional pathway of going and getting a degree, whatever. They're trying to enrich themselves in the finance field because they're, you know, manufacturing a product or they're creating some sort of service or whatnot, and they lack financial education, or they lack, you know, marketing education, or they lack operations, you know, so they can take these courses and still retain value. Now, keep in mind, this is open up to the global environment, right? Because the internet is you know, you can be in a foxhole in Afghanistan and take a class. Right. I joke. So, you know, people from all over the world are taking it. And statistics have shown, for this Wharton program specifically, they've had more people enroll and take their courses over the last couple of years than the entire alumni base of UPenn, Wharton. Over the last couple of years, and Wharton's been around for 100 years. Yeah. Okay, so you're just seeing the influx of people who want to take the. Now, granted, the completion rates tend to drop off quite a bit because they're not being held accountable, because, you know, they have to self-discipline themselves. So some people take a course or here and two, and then they whatever, and then they don't necessarily kind of finish their program. But all in all, it's accessible.
Sadly, Jay, this is something that our students won't like to hear, but tests matter. So, folks, more questions. We'd love to hear from more folks. Don't be shy now. You got a real person who's interested and wanted to chat.
Curious about your first business you developed when you were 15.
I can't talk about that. No, I'm kidding. I can't.
Jay, before you begin, could you please identify yourself?
Amanda.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks, Amanda. Appreciate it. So, you know, when I was a kid, I used to, my mom was in sales. And she sold real estate. So she would go to, you know, with her friends, she would go to a lot of self-help seminars. The Tony Robbins of the world, Les Williams, Jim Rohn, you know, I don't know if you know, the rah-rah, you know, get 10,000 people in a stadium and like, you can do it, you know, that type of thing. So motivational speakers. So she would go to those type of things, and I would tag along sometimes. And I would sit there and get mesmerized by these people because they were like gods, right? They were sitting there and people were like, oh, wow, you know, I can do it. And so a friend of mine, we're in high school, his dad would go to these things. So we would kind of like, we kind of got a fascination and we would sneak into some of these educational things. And we met Jim Rohn, we met Les Williams. They're like, oh, we were always like the youngest kids, right? And so we're like, you know what? Amongst our friends, like, how come there's no motivational thing for kids? So long story short, we created a tape series called Thinking Big Enterprises, piggybacking off what Jim Rohn, and Les Williams, and Tony Robbins of the world were saying, but for kids, for adolescents to say, hey, you know what, steer down the right path, get an education. If you're trying to get an athletic scholarship, what are the ways to do it? And we sold that tape series to counselors of high schools and stuff like that who needed some peripheral things. That's what we did.
I love it. Motivational Lego, I love it. So, that's it, so very good. Some more, we're coming up on that time where you have to go back to classes. But one more question maybe from folks? So
There's not a bad question, go ahead.
go ahead, yeah, please.
Okay, my name is Noah Pleasure. Earlier you spoke about trade and how what's being traded is moving further from physical things being traded to like data, essentially, intellectual property. Like, could you like elaborate on that? Like, what do you mean? Like, is data itself being like sold and traded?
So I wouldn't say data. When I say intellectual property, I'm talking about copyrighted products, like a movie, for example, right? A movie is copywritten, it's owned by the studios, whatever it is. It's not a physical good, it's not a physical product, it's a digital good. So that digital good is something that is traded in terms of its licensing rights and all of these type of things. Software, for example, is also intellectual property based on a digital good. So you could create a software and you can license it or have distribution to many different countries who can then further upsell it to their customers or whatever. So there's a physical good, which are widgets, clothes, whatever it is, and then digital goods, which are things things of value that are owned by someone, like a movie, like music, for example, like software, like know-how. People license things that some sort of process for manufacturing or process for doing some sort of kind of graphics design or user or UX design, something of that nature that's again digital in nature, and pass it along. Books, a lot of books, a lot of educational type material are now all becoming digital, and all of that type of stuff are copywritten. So that's kind of in the category of know-how in terms of being able to export that.
Digitize your wonderful motivational tapes, revisit that. There you go. So
Dust them off.
that's it. Any other questions or comments for Jay? Folks, we really, one more follow-up, please?
One more.
Please.
Just speaking about patents and stuff, I know there's a lot of patent companies out there that help you patent ideas and stuff like that. What are good startup ones that don't necessarily take your idea and then tell you won't work and move further along with that, and then you just find out later?
So that's a good question, and people in the entrepreneurial world discuss this a lot in terms of protection, because you always want to erect some barriers to entry, right? So prevent someone stealing your idea or whatnot. And there are a lot of patent trolls. So people that get an idea, or if they think of someone has an idea, they patent it, and then they have no intention of actually creating the product, but they have the patent. So therefore, whoever creates a product would have to work with them and license and buy them out or whatever. Obviously the best way is to go to a patent attorney. So there's a lot of good patent attorneys that would charge some sort of fee or defer some of their fees if they really like the idea to help you patent it. There is no guarantee. There's two types of patents: a provisional and a non-provisional. Provisional, basically you file it. Basically it's called first to file. You lock in that idea. So if someone wants to file it later on, you hold precedence. You have a year to file your non-provisional. And a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of companies are filing patents, right? And some big companies like the Nokia, the Qualcomms of the world, the value of their company is in their IP. They have thousands and thousands of patents. Apple has thousands and thousands of patents. Some of them they never build products for, but they just own these patents. So, going to a patent attorney, there are some startup patent or patent law firms or patent agencies that actually help startups, so they reduce their fees to kind of buy you some time. So that's kind of the traditional path of what should be done. But definitely, if you're an entrepreneur thinking about creating something, that's one of the top things that should always be on your list, is looking to somehow protect your idea or protect your product. A lot of software companies are doing it, but last year there was a big case in the Supreme Court that overturned a big software case. So now it's harder and harder to patent software. But nevertheless, it's definitely something that should be priority if you're an entrepreneur building something.
Terrific. Integrate, protect, promote, a lot of great big idea concepts, Jay. Thank you so much. Let's give Jay a round of applause.
Thank you.
And that concludes our Coffee House series. Thank you so much for coming and participating.